Hey everyone, Daniel here from Twin Bytes with another tutorial for you. This time we're going to be talking about the top things that you need to disable in Windows 10 right now, which will improve on your security and privacy. So stick around. So in this video I'm going to show you a whole bunch of things that you probably want to disable that are going to both improve the security on your device as well as your privacy. So we're going to be looking at Cortana and a bunch of other features that can be disabled from different locations on your computer. So let's take a look at this, starting with Cortana. The first thing is disabling Cortana, and if you have the Windows 10 Pro Edition, I'm going to show you how to do that here. And if it's a home edition, you're going to have to do it through a registry edit, which I'll link the edit location in the description below. What we want to do is click on the start button and type in group policy, and you'll see a link that appears here for edit the group policy. And that brings up the local group policy editor. We'll adjust that so we can see a bit more. So what we want to look for is under administrative templates. We'll expand that, then Windows components, and then scroll down. There is search. If we click on search, we can make this a bit bigger, and there's a few things in here that we probably want to disable. The first thing is the allow Cortana, and if you don't use Cortana and you don't want that to be part of your system at all, you can disable that. You can right click on it, go to edit. It says it's not configured, whether it's allowed or not to force in either direction, so it's just going with the default settings. So we're going to hit disable and apply that, and OK. The other thing is on your lock screen when the computer is locked, whether or not Cortana can be activated while it's locked. So you can also edit that and go to disable and apply and OK. Now of course with all of these things here, you have to look at if you use these things and you like these features and you want to have them on, then for you it would make sense to have it on. So moving on, the next thing is allow Cortana page in OBE and AAD account. So again, if you're not making use of Cortana, none of this should matter. And all of this is reversible as well. You can just go back into it and say not configured or enabled. Next thing here is allow search in Cortana to use the location. Now this isn't just about Cortana, this is about search in general. So when you're searching for anything online, it's going to be looking at your location to see where you are to help give you the best results possible. So if you like that where it will search and find things for you in your location, that's great. But if you don't want anyone tracking your location where you're at all, you can do it right from this top level here. So we'll go into edit that and disable it. Again, you can turn it back on again if you find that this is not very convenient and you'd rather have that on. The other part of this I left for last, even though it's at the top of the list, is allow cloud search. Now this is for search and Cortana together. It's not just Cortana. And it looks for, when you're doing a search for anything on your computer, it will also search the internet-based files. So if you're using things like OneDrive or SharePoint where you have documents that are stored in the cloud, if you turn this off, it's not going to be able to find those documents. So it's up to you whether or not you want to turn that feature off. For me, I think I might leave that feature on. This is with Windows 10 Pro. I'm going to close out of here now. If you are using the home edition of Windows 10, the path to the registry I'll link up here on the screen and also down in the description below. And of course, before messing around with the registry, you should always take a registry backup, and it's as easy as going into file and export and saving a file to your computer somewhere. So if something goes sideways, you can import that registry backup. Another hidden area on the computer is the Windows features. Again, if we go in the Start menu and just start typing in turn Windows features, and you can see I don't even have to type the whole thing in and it appears. We'll go in here and it gives us a list of some programs that show check marks for those things that are installed and little squares for those things that have one or more but not all options selected. So one of the things to remove, you might want to get rid of, is Internet Explorer 11. I know a lot of people that are stuck on that because they're from Windows 7 and they really like to use the old Internet Explorer with the golden arch around it, but that's going away. Microsoft's replaced that with Edge, which is the latest, more secure browser to use, and they've even made more improvements to it where it looks and feels more like Google Chrome. So, and especially if you're using Google Chrome, Firefox, or some other web browser and you're not using Internet Explorer 11, then we'll simply turn that off. And it tells you that it might affect some other programs on your computer if you turn that off, because it's required for some things. So we can say yes and turn it off, and if you notice you're having any issues, you can come back in here and put the check mark back on again. Now scrolling down a little bit further, there's media features, and if we expand that, you'll see the Windows Media Player. It's the only thing under media features. It's been replaced by Groove, and you may be using your own media players like Spotify and that sort of thing. So if you're not using Windows Media Player, you can disable that. It's not a big security concern, but it is something in the list here that whatever old programs that are still added in here, if you're not using those things, then just turn them off. I'm going to leave mine on because I still access it from time to time. Microsoft Print to PDF, not everyone uses that, and a lot of people ask about what is that, why is it there, and how do I get rid of it. Well, you want to uncheck this option here and it will disappear from your list of devices and printers. Under the print and document services, there's a couple of things in here, such as internet printing if you want to enable printing from the web through web-based printers. I'm not sure exactly the full extent of this here, but you can try turning it off, and if something is not working that you use, I can't tell you whether or not you need this feature, but it is something that allows access between your computer and web-based services. Windows Fax and Scan is local, and it's an old program, and not everyone uses it, but you may be for some type of printers, especially if they're not having the software that's fully compatible with Windows 10, and it's going to default to using this program to do scans with. And for me, I'm making use of that, so I want to keep that on. Scrolling down a bit more, we've got Windows PowerShell 2.0, and it can expand out, and it's just got the engine for that. Now we can safely disable that, usually because we're up to at least version 5, I believe it is now, as of the recording of this video, so there should be no need for keeping the 2.0 on there. It's old and outdated. If there's anything that you have that requires the older version of this for some reason, then it's going to scream at you, and of course you can just go back in here and turn that back on. One of the last things in here is allowing file synchronization with a configured file server. You may or may not need this to be on, and if you really want to tighten things up, you can turn that off and see if everything continues to work. But if something is not working, of course, you can go back in and turn that back on again. So we'll go ahead and turn that off and hit OK. It goes through to search for any files it needs for things that we enabled that it needs to download and install. Otherwise, it's removing what we told it to remove, and it wants to reboot the computer. So you would just hit restart now, and those changes will take effect. Now for the next most exciting thing, which is a lot easier to go through, is the Windows security privacy settings. So we go through the start menu under settings and privacy. And there is a huge list of categories here that will go through them all, and for the most part everything can be turned off, and I'll explain some of the things that are more critical. Otherwise we're going to plow through this fairly quickly. So starting off with the general category, usually you can have all of these things turned off, and you'll find that I have a lot off, but they're not all off by default. So you're going to want to go through this on your system, and you can take your time more carefully to read what the descriptions are, and there's more information over on the right as well that talks about this. Under the speech here, it has speech recognition, so of course that means they have to make use of your microphone and listen to you to be able to recognize the speech. So if you don't want to have Microsoft listening to you 24/7 while you're sitting in front of the computer talking to yourself or talking to a friend, then you might want to turn that off, unless you're making use of the microphone for certain services that require this to be on. So again, it's up to you, but you can read more about this here. Inking and typing personalization, I have this off as well. I'm not sure anyone that even uses that. Diagnostic and feedback is meant to help them help you better. So sending them information is a good thing so that they can recognize when there's issues, and they can do bug fixes and send out updates to patch those problems. Now you'll see there's no option to turn this off. It's only either basic or full information. So I recommend usually basic, unless you're really fine with providing full information and you don't care about them seeing all this other stuff, and they only mention a little bit in the summary here. Scrolling down a bit, there's more options here that you can selectively control if they're on or off. And again, you can see that for the most part you can have this all turned off. Feedback frequency, they'll ask you for feedback which they'll send automatically, or you can control how often, including never. And fixing problems recommended, they're going to fix it one way or another, but it'll ask you first before fixing them if you choose that, or just tell them to fix only the critical problems automatically. Otherwise you can have it fix everything automatically without asking if you're not sure. Activity history, this they're being able to track your history of everything that you do, basically, that's tied through your Microsoft account. So if you're especially signing into the computer with your Microsoft account, it's tied to their servers, so it can store your history online and even sharing the activities to your account online. So I've got this all turned off, and you can even go down here to the bottom and say to clear the history. That's the basic Windows permissions. Now we move on to app permissions, starting with the location. So the location is helpful when you're doing searches and to find out where you're located, but if you'd rather have that off, you can just hit the change button and either turn it on or off. And then if you just click anywhere else outside of that little window, then it closes that for you, and it shows here if that feature is on or off. And that's the same for many of the options here. Allowing apps to access your location, you can individually control them, or you can just turn it off altogether, which is what I've done here. You can set your default location because we're not having it track us, and you can also have your location controlled. So you can clear the location history on the device. And then controlling which access have access to your precise location. That's kind of scary, but I have everything turned off. But if there's anything that requires to be turned on, then we can go ahead and individually enable those. The camera you have access to for certain apps, and you may need this for certain things, especially if you're doing webinars. So you may not want to turn that off from up here like I did for the other thing earlier. So allowing access to your camera, yeah, I'm not going to turn it off completely, but if we scroll down, you can see the individual programs that you can turn on and off and say what has access to your camera. And these are apps, not programs. So Skype is an app, that's on. If we scroll down further, then we can see individual desktop programs, and they are listed down here. So you can turn that off individually as well, so no desktop apps can access your camera, or you can just yeah, it's either on or off. You have no control individually over each one, unfortunately, with this. So moving on to the microphone, of course, listening to you in general. We already looked at part of that earlier with Cortana. Now here you're going to want to have that on, probably again for when you're doing webinars or web conferences. So you're going to want to individually control this. So we leave it on here and here, but scrolling down, seeing which Microsoft Store apps can access your microphone. And as we go down again, of course, for me, I've got Skype. You may have other individual apps, and you'd have to look at each one individually and control that. Desktop apps that have access, again, Zoom is not being recognized as an app, but it is on here as a program that was installed and being used. And of course, I got my video recording, and this here is saying currently in use because obviously I am using this to do my screen capture right now. Voice activation is good if you need more hands-free, but for most of us, if you have full use of your hands and fingers and you have no problem typing, you're not going to be making use of voice activation, then maybe you want to turn that off. Or even if you just find it a little bit creepy that you could be just talking and the computer's listening to you to get a command. It doesn't know if you say something unless it's listening 24/7. So if that scares you a little bit, then turn it off. Notifications. This gives you notification pop-ups on your computer, and you can have this again turned off or individually choose which apps have the ability to give notifications. And this option, like I mentioned earlier, it changes this for everyone. So if you turn that off, then if you have multiple users on your computer, then no other user can even turn this feature on unless they're an administrator and they can override this function for you. Under account information, allowing access to your account information, this only gives us again a summary of some of the things, and I just don't feel comfortable with that because trying to find out what exactly is the full extent of the information they have access to in our account. You can only control which apps, and of course I have this off from the top level, so all apps is off, so every app here is off. Under contacts, you can allow access to your contacts from certain apps. Now, especially if you're in business, you're using Microsoft Outlook. Outlook is your contact manager. And if you're using Gmail, which the rest of the world is most likely using, then your Gmail is having all the contacts. So I see no reason for why any of these other apps would need access to your contacts. Even photos. How does photos have access to your contacts unless they want to identify them? So it doesn't make sense unless you're using the mail and calendar feature or you're using Cortana for it to be able to search and look up people, then you can have that turned on. But again, that's if you're making use of the voice activation or doing searches through Cortana or the mail and calendar app that comes with Windows 10. Under the calendar, it's the exact same thing as the contacts. I just have it off. I'm not using these programs. If you're making use of the feature to have your cell phone tied to the computer so you can receive phone calls and text messages, then you might want to leave this turned on. And then the apps, you can control which apps have access, which really should only be this one app here, unless you install some other apps, or after the making of this video there could be others. The call history, of course, is tracking your history of calls if you had the phone tied here. So you can control which devices and apps, or which apps have access to the history if you're making use of the phone calls. Next is email. Allowing email access, of course, using these apps, but as I said earlier, if you're using Microsoft Outlook, like for business, or Gmail, then you don't need any of this at all. The tasks can control the tasks on your computer. Certain apps you can have turned on and off. I don't want to have anything else controlling that. I want to have full control over what tasks are being run. Messaging ties into the phones that we just mentioned earlier. It's the exact same thing as the phone options. Radios allows access to other devices that you can control, like you'd have your phone or radio app, and again, if you're not using any of these apps or features, then you can have this turned off. Other devices is a little bit scary. It's one of those things that you should have off unless there's a device that you're trying to pair to your system that doesn't have a specific pairing procedure, and you're not able to pair it using the standard pairing procedure. I'm repeating myself there. But if it's not capable of pairing using a code and that sort of thing that you normally go through when pairing a device, then you would need to turn this on to allow those devices to pair. Otherwise, just having that on means that anything can pair automatically, and once it's paired, as it says here, let your apps share and sync info wirelessly to devices that don't explicitly pair with your PC, tablet, or phone. I don't want anything pairing with my computer and starting to sync, and I don't know that something is paired and syncing automatically behind the scenes. That just is a little bit scary. Background apps, you can have these things turned on if you want, or just individually the ones that you know you're using. You can have them run in the background, and it has some benefits to it if you want to get the alerts from those apps or have them update automatically for you. Otherwise, you don't need to have them running in the background all the time. This is a security feature as well as a performance thing. So for better security and performance, I would say to disable them all, and anything that you do use, the next time you open it, it'll check if there's any updates and alerts for that program. App diagnostics. So this is able to look at your computer overall and get diagnostic information for the apps. You can turn it all on and off completely, or just for the individual apps. And with this one in particular, it's just using the one app that makes use of this particular feature. Automatic file downloads. Again, you kind of know by now my opinion on some of these things, and it's up to you whether or not you want to have this turned on or off. But we have this blocked from a higher level, so it's not even allowing us to turn this on. Documents, again, allowing access to documents. The only thing I want to have access to my documents is the program that I'm opening that document within. not any other apps. So there's a bunch of apps that would show that here. We don't need this. Windows security would be for scanning for viruses, for example. Well, you hopefully have a better antivirus program than the built-in Windows security, and it will be scanning the documents for viruses. Pictures is the exact same thing as documents. Turn it off unless you want to allow specific access. And something interesting here, pictures for Microsoft Whiteboard. I've already confirmed that with this turned off, I can go into Microsoft Whiteboard and still insert pictures. So it doesn't mean that it's not going to work when this is turned off. So if you're not sure about some of these things and you want to have tighter security, turn it off, test it, make sure the programs work, and if it doesn't work, then you know that you got to come back in here and turn them back on again. Videos is the exact same thing again, so documents, pictures, videos. File system, this I couldn't stress enough that file system is what hackers are targeting. They don't want to just give you a virus on a particular file or something. They want to control your system. They gain access by getting you to download a single file that's virus infected. But allowing full control to the back end of your computer system automatically, I don't like to have that happen, and it'll just add apps automatically as it goes. So that's just allowing one more doorway for a hacker to get into your system. That's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you guys found this helpful, and give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every time we come out with a new video each week. And let me know in the comments below what other security or other videos in general that you'd like to hear about. Alright, thanks so much guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.